a little video for 5 minutes, and just have a look around. watching. So as this thing, or this installation is playing out, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Hallager Andersen. And my presentation here today is the live element of my project for my creative practice. And the title, some of you got a little handout, the title of the project is Knowing, Not Knowing, and Pleasure, a journey into dance improvisation. So this presentation here today, it works in tandem with my written documentation, which some of you will get the opportunity to read. And so what I aim to do here today is not so much to explain the whole project or to explain the thesis part, but to share the practice and the more kinesthetic aspect of the research that I feel that the written document can't really show. So I'll start by giving just a brief introduction to the research project, some of it which you have been witnessing here, to give you some little bit of context and explain what it is I'll be showing. And then I'll do a demonstration, and finally finish by just summing up with a couple of quotes at the end of the session. So it should be about 30 minutes. So to start, I should explain what you're witnessing here. So this, I didn't really want to call it an art installation because it's mainly just an account of my some material that has accumulated and falling apart as part of my research. So an archive, if you will, a bit of history of what's been happening. So it's more of a construction of the research labs that I've been doing. So one aspect of my investigation was to explore ideas and concepts with a group of improvisers. And what you see here is what happened in these labs. So there are scores that I developed, those things in blue. There are scores that I've been writing out to test ideas and concepts, and some of the other things are responses from the participants, reflections, ideas. And the footage also that you witnessed is just an account of what we were doing. So it felt important to bring this aspect into the presentation today as a testament to what has happened, what has gone before today, but which is now in the past. And I hope it gives a little bit of information about what we've been up to and what the practical research has been. So briefly explain my research, but as I said, this is a practical element, so the full story you have to get in my big documentation. So the project is an investigation into knowing, not knowing, and pleasure in my practice as a dance improviser. And this bodily experience of knowing is an experience of being skilled and an expert with something, knowing how to improvise, but also very specifically to improvisation is knowing how to make decisions. What does it mean to make decisions when you improvise? And there's something there about being present to the dance that's unfolding. At the same time, the dancer has to navigate not knowing, and specific again to improvisation is the uncertainty of exploring that which is unfamiliar. So that's part of going into an improvisation practice, is to meeting that which is unfamiliar. So I was interested in this relationship in how not knowing puts knowing into question. There's sort of a framing that the not knowing frames the knowing. But what really fuels my practice is the pleasure. So I get an enormous amount of pleasure from dancing. I'm sure that's why most of us dance. But for me, that pleasure is really what fuels my practice. And so I was curious how that pleasure relates to decision making, how does pleasure relate to being in this place between, or navigating this place between knowing and not knowing? What is the pleasure about? So the project is practice-based, and therefore this investigation has primarily been a practical one, but alongside it I've explored the topics from a more theoretical viewpoint, and this has informed my practice, and the practice has then informed my reading, so the two sort of reciprocally been feeding each other. So this is all the groundwork that has propelled the research forwards, and what then happened over the course of the research and the project is that I realized that all these elements, this knowing and the not knowing and the pleasure, I could take them apart and I could read about them and I could explore them in my thinking, but in my practice they were not separate. So there was this experience of non-separation and letting go of the idea of them as something that were possessions, something that I could hold on to and use in my conversation. So that's sort of giving you a very, very brief idea of what I've been up to. And so what I want to show today is where the practice is now. So it's not a response to this archive that's sort of been in the past now. It's more an extension of it. So I feel like this is, of course, an archive in my body, but it's something that's coming out of it. So it's a response to this, the beginning to understand that this knowing and the not knowing and the pleasure is dispersed throughout my body in the dance as it happens. So I've got 3 scores, and I've written them out here. I'm going to show them to you as I do them. So I've got 3, and I'm going to set a little timer. So I've got 4 minutes to try each of them out. And you're free to walk around, or go and have a sit down, or stay where you are. Or it's really just, you're witnessing me testing out these scores. So the first one I'm going to do is this one here. And I think it says, be right between being an expert and a beginner. So I'll leave it here. So I'm setting a timer, so then I know how long I've got. Second one. Be on your way to the next movement. I'm the one. Inhabit the room and relate to everything. Thank you. So, to finish, I'll gather you in a bit. So I would like to finish the presentation by quoting two artists who have been really influential and significant in this process. And the first one is sort of book over there, is Deborah Hay. And she uses the what if, the potential for something to happen. And you've got the quote in here for you, you can read it yourself. What if every cell in your body at once has the potential to choose to surrender the pattern of facing a single direction? And this quote, amongst many of the Deborah Hay quotes, started to resonate more and more with my practice as I was going through the project. And there's something about this what if that opens up into an exploration and continues to reach for an answer. And what I was trying to do with my scores is, without directly adopting her what if, to try and implement this sense of impossibility. So I was interested in how I could create a score that creates the same sense of reaching for something. And I think it challenging working with trying to develop those scores and get it right. And I realized as soon as I'd done them, that they felt old or they felt used. So coming back to doing the same scores that I had practiced was the challenge for today, was to try and do them again for the first time. So this exploration of that's the point of these scores, and also of how Deborah Hay is phrasing these directives, is that the exploration is endless, and you're aiming to solve a paradox. And I find that really resonates with how that experience of knowing and not knowing and pleasure constantly moving through the body as I'm practicing. So I can never grasp it, I can never hold on to it. So it's a constant, it's right in front of me or it's right behind me, but it's never there to hold on to, in the same way that the what if question is never resolved. Yeah, so these coaching directives from Deborah Hay, they became really key for trying to understand my own practice and to help me articulate also my way of being with this experience that I had in my body. And the final quote that you've also got on there is from Nancy Stark-Smith, and that was the second thing that felt that resonated with my practice. And she says, this is the book called Cold Falling, "Has my dancing changed dramatically over the years? It feels more like slow evolution than major gear shifting." And I thought, yes, that's how my practice has felt, and how this project has felt for me, is that I don't think my dancing has changed appearance. I don't think it looks different, but I think my idea of how I practice, my thinking around my dance improvisation practice has shifted, and I think that the experience of the practice more than anything has really changed for me. So I felt that really, again, really resonated with what Nancy Stark-Smith says in this point. So I think that's all I have to say for today. So thank you so much for coming, for your attention. And yeah, that's all for me.
Talk about the scores. So what do you think, how do you conceive of a score?
How do I conceive of a score?
What is a score for you in that respect? There are so many scores, different scores. What for you is a means of scoring something?
Well, I mean, for me, it's a wide range of things. It's even having said the alarm for 4 minutes is a score in itself. A space is a score, so it could be as wide as that. But in terms of constructing scores, I have found that these imperatives work quite well. So the way that I say be, or do this, or articulate. So there's a prompt. Yeah, so there's something about trying to live up to something that I feel has, that has been quite useful in actually activating that part of myself, which sometimes is not activated. The familiarity of improvisation can be quite humdrum. Yes, I know this thing. But by using the imperative, I feel like I'm pushed out to that edge. When I talk about framing, so really literally feel like I'm framing the knowing with the not knowing. So there's this, playing against that edge. I tried a lot to work with rephrasing the what if to like consider this, but it became a bit. I think what if is perfect, actually, it's the truth. But I wasn't really interested in just doing it at a Hay score. I was interested in developing how I could find this for me.
About 4 minutes.
You've got two more,
I've
yeah.
got two.
Yeah, I mean, it has been. It was very challenging. challenging to find the right scores for today, and I went through a whole bunch of them and rephrased and tried them out, and like I said, having done them, then felt it was easy to throw them away and feel that now I've done this and it can't be new. But then that was exactly the point, in a way, of the practice and of my whole project, is trying to let go and experience this dispersion of knowing, of being skillful and having an expertise, and of stepping into uncertainty. With that score, that seems like it's been done, but because it never reaches that conclusion, it never reaches that end, it is an endless exploration. So it was actually a good way for me when I thought, what scores am I going to use to say, I just use these ones, I've done them before, but this is the challenge, to try and come back to doing them for the first time again. Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.